Good afternoon, sir. Can you see and hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Greenhalgh, before I move on, is there anything further you wish to say about the matters that we were discussing shortly before the lunch break?
No, that's okay. Thank you.
My next topic is the extent of change which has been brought about within the Post Office. Within the Post Office.
No, but change
is the extent of change which has been brought about within the Post Office.
Thank you.
In your statement and in your evidence to the inquiry this morning, you've expressed concern that the culture of the Post Office has not changed. Is that correct?
Certainly at a board and senior executive level, yes.
In your statement, you cite as an example the time which it has taken to negotiate changes to the grant framework agreement to remove the clauses which restricted the activities of the NFSP. Yeah. Is that correct? You describe those negotiations as protracted and difficult. Is that fair?
Yes.
And you suggest that, so far as you're concerned, they are evidence of the fact that the leopard has not changed its spots.
Yes.
Please could we bring up your statement at paragraph 317. On page 113. So you say there that the Post Office provided the NFSP with a note of novation. And when was that, please? Do you recall?
Yeah, it would be some point in 2019, the exact month, I can't remember, but it would be in 2019.
You say the legal advice we received said that this did not address the specific clauses which were raised by Lord Justice Fraser at paragraphs 590 and 596 of the Common Issues Judgment, those being those relating to clauses 5, 17 and 26. You say the advice we received is that the grant framework agreement would require significant alteration to comply with the Common Issues Judgment. You go on to say that an amended note of novation was prepared by your solicitors and presented to the board of the NFSP in October 2019 and approved prior being sent to Post Office for consideration. You then say this: it has taken the best part of 5 years to get the Post Office to the point of agreeing some of the changes we were proposing. Now, I think it's right to say that you attribute that significant period of delay to the Post Office. Is that correct?
Yes.
And one of the issues you say that acted as a stumbling block was their refusal to acknowledge that they had a duty to act in good faith towards their members. Is that correct?
Well, one of the aspects that Lord Justice Fraser talks about is that the Post Office had a duty to act in good faith in relation to postmasters. And he makes such that is really a central tenet of his ruling, that we felt that it was important that if that is how the Post Office are supposed to behave towards postmasters, that given the fact that the NFSP is postmasters, then that's how they should sort of act towards the NFSP as well.
If we could look, please, at paragraph 319, so it's a little further down. Sorry, onto the next page, please. So you explain there what you've just said, that so far as you are concerned, this issue of good faith was a central tenet of the judgment. You say this: we propose that the term good faith be placed in the recitals section, but this was rejected by the Post Office. The reality of the Post Office refusing all attempts to include this tenet in the grant framework agreement gives voice to concerns that culturally, Post Office has not changed, and that there is an unwillingness by the Post Office to act in good faith towards the NFSP, and therefore our postmaster members. Now, a new grant framework agreement has now been signed by both the NFSP and the Post Office. Is that
yes.
correct? For the benefit of the transcript, that document bears the reference WITN 00370137. And please could that be shown on the screen? Thank you. If we scroll over the page, please. Thank you. And sorry, again, then down to page 1, please. Yes, thank you, the first page of the agreement. So it's dated the 16th of September 2024, so very recent, since the time that you produced your statement. By way of background, it states this: the Post Office and the NFSP are parties to a grant framework agreement originally entered into between the Post Office and the unincorporated association known as the National Federation of Sub-Postmasters, dated the 21st of July 2015, and novated to the NFSP by a deed of novation, dated 5th of November 2016. You may recall I asked you about the deed of novation. Does that help you as to why there was a deed of novation?
Yeah, but I'll be honest with you, I can't explain sort of what the deed of novation sort of was about, why there was an update. I don't know.
There seems to be a distinction being drawn here between
Yes.
the NFSP as an unincorporated association
Right.
and its subsequent incarnation as a private limited company.
So if that may be the reason why then, because certainly when the certification officer ruled that we weren't a trade union, we were unincorporated for a period of time, and then until we actually got ourselves incorporated.
It goes on to say this at B, following Alan Bates and others versus Post Office Limited, the Common Issues judgment, the parties have agreed to amend the original grant framework agreement to address those matters raised in the Common Issues judgment relating to the original grant framework agreement. The parties have therefore agreed to amend and restate the original grant framework agreement as set out in this deed. We can see it, page 14, please. There's a new clause 5. Thank you. This reads, the general conditions of the grant. Both parties shall use reasonable endeavours to identify any issues which will or may create tensions between the interests of the Post Office and those of postmasters, and use reasonable endeavours to resolve any such issues. Secondly, for the avoidance of doubt, it is hereby acknowledged that the NFSP may, firstly, represent individual postmasters, secondly, discuss and comment on the Post Office's initiatives, policies and strategies with its membership, thirdly, publicly comment on the same, fourthly, state and explain its opinions on the same, even if not in support of Post Office, and finally, lobby relevant stakeholders such as BAYS and Royal Mail Group Limited on behalf of its members. So quite a significant change then relative to the provisions that we looked at this morning.
Yes, I mean that's obviously in line with Lord Justice Fraser's ruling. And why did it take 5 years to do that? I have no idea.
I'd like to move on, please, if I may, to the subjects of audits and investigations. You said earlier in your evidence that I think you accept that there has been a change of culture within the Post Office so far as their conduct of audits and investigations is concerned. Is that correct?
Yes, there has, and I think that's down to the individuals involved, and I think they have to be congratulated on that. However, that's not to sort of say that we're kind of where we need to be. No, I do feel that we need to do more, and I still think the Post Office is acting as judge, jury and executioner in certain aspects, and we need to have something in place that will enable the Post Office to bring its evidence, particularly where there's a disagreement with the postmaster, and the postmaster can bring their evidences as well, and that can be deliberated on and discussed in a far more open and transparent way, rather than as we have seen in relation to what took place with one of the postmaster non-executive directors.
Can you please clarify what you mean when you say that in certain respects the Post Office is still acting as judge, jury and executioner?
Well, they determine sort of whether there is a shortfall. They'll obviously, as I've said earlier on, there's the three questions. Is it Horizon? Is it a mistake, and by whom? Or has the assets been used in the manner that was not intended? Postmasters are still explaining that they are experiencing losses. They then receive a letter, which isn't a demand for money, but is you've got a debt. And we need to be in a situation where the Post Office are able to bring that to an open and transparent conclusion, rather than it just going on and going on. And some of these cases have been outstanding for years because they can't be brought to a conclusion. And I do think we need to be in a situation where we have complete confidence in Horizon as a system. As I've highlighted, postmasters are still experiencing shortfalls. We've asked the government for a full in-depth look at the hardware, the software, the telecommunications, processes, practices within Fujitsu and also within the Post Office, but there's a reluctance to do that. I still think that there's a belief within the Post Office that Horizon is robust. I had a conversation with officials in the Department of Business and Trade not that long ago where I asked the question, and I was told that the Post Office are telling them that the system is robust. How are postmasters experiencing shortfalls? So I think we need to. There needs to be something else there that enables both the Post Office and postmasters to come together, so that it's certainly. I can't remember if it was SAF or Mr. Ismail or Mr. Jacobs who were talking about these being done externally. Don't disagree with that to a point, but what we have been saying for a long period of time is there needs to be another process where the Post Office can bring to an independent body and the Postmaster can bring to an independent body if they have concerns about what the conclusion is the Post Office draw.
You've explained in your statement that the NFSP is aware of 4 cases in which a sub-postmaster has requested support in their defence, either of a criminal prosecution
Yes.
or a civil claim.
Yes.
And that in one of those cases, the sub-postmaster has been exonerated. Is that correct?
It was, yes. If I may sort of get, this wasn't something that was done by the Post Office. It was the police who brought this. I don't think I should go into maybe the specifics of the case, only on the basis I'm not sure if I can, within this framework or not. But
well, let me ask you this: in relation to the exoneration, you said that it was a criminal prosecution was brought.
Yes.
At what stage was it? At what stage was the sub-postmaster exonerated?
I think it went to court and it was thrown out.
Okay, so it will be a matter of public record. Did you or any of your colleagues have concerns about the manner in which that case was investigated or the way in which the prosecution was conducted?
Yes, but as I say, it wasn't done by the police. Sorry, it wasn't done by the Post Office, it was done by the police. And I was concerned as to the way the police were going about it. They seemed to just look at the postmaster is guilty until proven otherwise. Hence the reason when they came to us, we need to get some legal advice here. And I was directed to a solicitor who would be able to help because it was down south. So obviously my connections are north of the border and obviously different jurisdiction. And I have to sort of say I was delighted in the way that the solicitor approached it, how they engaged with the NFSP, how they sought the NFSP's help and guidance in relation to things, and just how they approached the postmaster with the greatest of respect and support right the way through. And the stress that postmaster was under was colossal. But thankfully, ultimately, the right decision was made.
But to be clear, in this particular case, your concerns related to the conduct of the police force, the office
Yes.
that's investigating,
Yes.
rather than the post office.
Yes, the post office really didn't have anything to do with it as far as an investigation is concerned.
You say in your statement that your relationship, the relationship of the NFSP with the leadership of the post office is very strained.
Yes.
You suggest there's a lack of trust. There remains a lack of trust in the senior management and board of the post office.
Yes.
And you cite as an example what you say was a failure by the post office to be open and honest with the NFSP about the extent of problems that were being encountered in the project to replace Horizon. Is that correct?
Not just NFSP, but other postmasters who were present.
Can you expand, please, on that?
Well, there was another group of postmasters who were present. So there was myself and my chair, Tim Boothman, who were present at that, and there was other postmasters who were present.
And at that meeting you were told what?
That there had been problems with the new business IT, but these had been overcome and were on track, and we've got a strategy ahead.
And why do you characterise that as displaying a lack of transparency?
Well, given the fact that the very following day, Computer Weekly gave a completely different story, the accurate story, that there are serious concerns within government in relation to how the programme is being developed, the cost of the programme. Not only is it behind schedule, it's been taken in-house. I can't remember exactly what the department within government it's been looked at, but it's all to do with, I do mention it in my statement, but it's the part of government that looks after all the major infrastructures like HS2, etc., that's looking after it. I think there was a government audit team had looked at it and had highlighted grave concerns, so there was nothing along that lines. Kind of ironically, my wife and I had been given tickets to Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and we were sitting in the theatre and on the break, and I looked at my phone and up came the report from Computer Weekly. I read it. I immediately emailed Nick Reid and said, what the heck's going on here? This is not what you told us yesterday. That resulted in a conversation on the Friday with the head of IT services within the post office. And I simply said, listen, if I was the new chair and you had told me what you told me on Wednesday, and on Thursday I've learned what I've learned, what do you think the conversation would be today? That's it. I mean, you had the most senior individuals within the post office from an executive point of view in that meeting, bar obviously Al Cameron, who was the chief financial officer, and basically what the NFSP and other postmasters were told was not accurate.
In your statement you say that you believe the problem lies in the governance of the post office.
Oh, without question, yes.
But you don't believe that the creation of the sub-postmaster non-executive director is the answer to that problem, is that right?
And I think it brings a conflict on the basis that they have their own businesses, potentially directors within their own businesses, and therefore they have to act in the interest of the business of which they are a director. Is it possible, they can't vote on a number of things, particularly in relation to remuneration? So I don't think it necessarily is the answer, no. And unfortunately, you have to listen with great empathy and sympathy as to what both those two postmaster non-executive directors have gone through. They have tried everything they possibly can to try and help this business turn round. But this business is not prepared to listen, and it will do anything and everything to undermine anybody who threatens its position of power, authority and influence.
your proposed solution to the problem is the establishment of an oversight committee. Is that
Yes.
correct? Can you please explain briefly what your proposal is in that respect?
So it's a board. It's actually quite common, sort of, on the continent, I, back in 2022, I was sitting thinking, what can we do? I was understanding that the governance was the problem, and I really felt that the relationship between government, the civil service, and post office was the fundamental problem that had resulted in this scandal happening. And everything was being done just to push it down the line, push it down the line, push it down the line. So we needed to have a situation where we could have a body that would sit alongside. It's not to replace, it's not to slow things down or obfuscate things, but actually to sit alongside and hold the post office to account. Because the reality is, in my view, as I look back on it, unfortunately, I don't think government have actually held the post office to account, and let me explain why. Back in 2018, the Post Office Board set a strategy, and that strategy was to defend the indefensible and ensure that the victims remain guilty. And they knew that there was a problem, but they still went ahead with it. And that would have been done with the knowledge, in my view, of government, because there's a government representative on the board. After everything had taken place, not one director of the board was asked to step down or looked at themselves in the mirror and went, yeah, we got this wrong. They all carried on. Indeed, the chief executive, while she left the business, left with a golden goodbye, a CBE and a job in a cabinet office. That's hardly an indication of the owner, the shareholder, thinking that the board had made the wrong decision. And given what came out right across the common issues and the horizon issues, judgments, never mind the recusal. So I felt that the relationship between post office, the civil service, and government was where the problem was. And I also think that as a postmaster, I am an investor. Well, I'm not a postmaster now, so apologies. But my postmaster colleagues are investors in this business. And over the last 30 years, I've seen decision after decision after decision that has resulted in the security and the viability of their businesses being undermined and reduced. Postmasters' income has declined from in 21. It's gone from 48 pence in the post up. Sorry. So put all of that together. I just feel that we need to have another body that can actually hold the post office to account and can work alongside it. And it's quite common, as I say, on the continent. So that's what we came up with.
Okay, so that's the background. What is your proposal in relation to the composition of this committee?
So government need to be on there. Obviously, they're the shareholder. Obviously, those who are the representatives, so Unite, who represent the management of the post office, the CW, who represent the employees of the post office, NFSP, that represents postmasters. But I do think it's also really important we bring on consumer champions, because it's about, the post office has a social purpose. So what is it that society needs? What is it that community needs from the post office? Government are making decisions that are having a detrimental impact. Post offices are closing right around the country. Postmasters are no longer able to afford to run their businesses. Communities are being left without post offices. Services are being taken away. And we need to bring those community champions or those consumer champions on so that government, when it's making decisions, actually understands what consumers need, rather than, in essence, decisions being made that actually have a detrimental impact on communities the length and breadth of the country.
What I'd like to focus on, Mr Greenhow, is how do you envisage this proposal for an oversight committee bringing about change in the culture of the post office, that being your concern, your primary concern, underlying a lot of the other matters that you...
Yeah, well, given the fact that government will be on that committee, then you're basically saying to the government, you're the shareholder, you own this business, here's the evidence that things are not right. We've got to put that right. If I go to...
Can I just pause you there? So what you've just said essentially is that you would like to have direct access to the government to be able to communicate the concerns of the organisation and the concerns of your members to ministers. Is that the essence of it?
Well, yes, I think sort of what we need to sort of be able to sort of do is, there is, to our knowledge, there is no strategy for the post office going forward. There isn't one. And to our knowledge, there really hasn't been one for a significant period of time. Now, post office might say something different, just saying that's our view. And therefore, I think those who represent the employees and postmasters, but also consumers, need to be able to work with government, the shareholder, to ensure that there is a strategy in place for the good of this business. But where things are being done wrong, there is a body there that can actually highlight this and actually bring this to the surface and hold post office to account. That was the problem in the past. All of this was getting done. You talked earlier on about transparency. This was all getting done behind the scenes between government, the civil service and the post office. And as a result of that, this was kicked down the can. The can was kicked down the road. There wasn't sort of the ability for it to really be brought to the surface. It was suppressed. And I think sort of with an oversight committee, we've got the opportunity to, if there is anything like this happens again, it's going to be brought to the surface. And government won't be able to obfuscate it. They won't be able to just brush it under the carpet.
You've mentioned in your statement that you've contributed to a tripartite working group comprising the Postal Affairs Minister and his department, the Post Office and the NFSP, is that correct?
Yes.
Does your proposal for an oversight committee reflect a concern that that working group is not providing adequate governance of the Post Office or contributing to adequate governance of the Post Office at present?
Well, I mean, we would talk just briefly sort of about NBIT. I have been trying to get the head of IT to come along to that tripartite working group so that he is providing an update within that forum as to how this is progressing. He's never appeared. He's never sort of come to it. And I don't know why. Every single time I ask for NBIT to be on the agenda, but it's not. I'm asking about what we can do to improve remuneration for postmasters. I'm not seeing anything. I'm not seeing anything that is giving me confidence that the government and the post office are working for the benefit of postmasters. It's as if it's a talking group, it's a talking shop. It's just, there's nothing there that's giving me confidence that we are actually working together for the good of the future of this business. And that I feel sort of is indicative of how things have been. I do believe that behind the scenes, government and post office are talking and are working. But I don't know what it is. I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what plan they have. And I'm worried about it, and so are my colleagues.
I think you've explained in your statement that you brought your proposal for an oversight committee to the working group.
Yes.
Is that correct? And what is the current status of that proposal?
Again, describe in my statement that the Minister asked us in January for the Post Office and the NFSP to work together and bring it back to him. The very first meeting that I had, I was told by the then Chief Retail Officer that the Post Office has no desire to change its governance whatsoever. Well, that kind of tells you a story. I had to really sort of push back to that individual, and I don't think he'd ever been spoken to in that manner by anyone before. Not that I was disrespectful, but it was just the fact that I was going, you're an employee of this organisation, and if the minister tells you to do something, you've got a duty to do that, and going against the wishes of the minister is not something that a senior employee of the Post Office should be doing. Where we are at this moment in time, yes, there are discussions as far as potential governance proposals. Obviously, I wasn't aware that the Post Office had commissioned Grant Thornton to look into governance of the Post Office. That's obviously come out now via the inquiry, and all of this was going on before. So I've been trying to push for a change in the governance of the Post Office at least for 2 years now. And it's good to sort of see that we are starting to make some progress. If I may, I'm not saying that it's the Oversight Committee is the only way. I'm not saying that if it's not my way, I'm not playing. But I do think we need to seriously look at the governance of the Post Office, because I think that is where it's fundamentally broken down for over such a long period of time that has resulted in so many people having their lives ruined.
Thank you. My final topic, Mr. Greenhow, is the current policies, that is to say the written policies of the Post Office in relation to audits, investigations, suspensions and other decisions. Now, you say in your statement that the NFSP was invited by the Post Office to comment upon drafts of a whole suite of policies governing this area, so that is to say the conduct of audits, investigations and decision-making in relation to the suspension and termination of a sub-postmaster's contract. In your statement you say that you're, and forgive me, that's something which you are now doing on an annual basis, is that correct?
Yes.
Reviewing and providing comments
Yes.
upon the policies.
If I may, sorry, although I was personally dealing with it along with another colleague, obviously the work that I'm doing as far as the inquiry, it's taken up so much of my time. I've had to step back from that at this moment in time and delegate it to other individuals within the NFSP.
You identify in your statement 2 areas of concern that you have in relation to the existing policies. One relates to what is known as the audit reporting script. Is that
Yes.
correct? That's a script, is this right, to be used by the Post Office auditor
Yes.
to address their first interactions with
Yes.
the sub-postmaster or his staff
Yes.
at the point at which they come to the branch to carry out an audit?
Yeah.
Could we look please at your statement at paragraph 326 on page 117. Thank you. You say there, we've raised concerns about the audit reporting script. We did suggest an alternative script, which the postmaster or OIC, can you explain that reference, please?
Officer in charge.
Thank you. Would be required to sign with a copy retained by the postmaster. Part of the opening script informed the postmaster or officer in charge that the NFSP was available for help and support. Additionally, we suggested a checklist for the postmaster and the officer in charge to follow, given the potential stressful situation that may be dealt with. This would enable notes to be taken for reflection afterwards. You say, sadly, this was rejected by the Post Office on a number of occasions. Were you given reasons as to why your proposals were rejected?
Do you know what they wanted to do?
Secondly, in the following paragraph, you mention some reservations you have about the role of the decision review panel. Is that correct? If we could turn, please, to the decision review policy that's contained at POL 0008892. Thank you. This is version 2.3. At page 2, please. At page 3, please. Thank you. Paragraph 1.3, under the heading Core Principles, it states a challenge will be heard by a review panel who will have no prior involvement in the circumstances which led to the termination and the challenge being raised. So this is a proposal effectively for a level of independent review of the decision to terminate the sub-postmaster's contract. Is that correct?
My understanding, yes.
And on page 7, please, paragraph 2.4. Under the heading Roles and Responsibilities, it provides this in relation to the review panel. It will be a panel consisting of independent external members who are responsible for deploying the procedures set out in this policy and for making a final decision on the review requested by the postmaster. The review panel will be supported by the Contract Investigation and Resolution Manager to firstly apply Post Office's underpinning behaviours of fairness, transparency and professionalism. Secondly, be fully conversant with this policy and linked policies. Thirdly, to gather as much information as possible relating to the background behind the termination. Fourthly, to complete a termination decision review rationale document before making a decision in consequence of a challenge. States the rationale document as a report which includes facts and findings of the investigation and the rationale used to determine the outcome. Fifthly, to ensure any decision arising from a challenge is made in line with all other Post Office policies. And finally, to ensure this policy is adhered to and the postmaster is treated with fairness, transparency and professionalism throughout the process. If we could go please to page 12, under paragraph 3.2, we see there an explanation of the role of the review panels. It provides it's the role of the review panel to ascertain whether the decision to terminate was taken in compliance with the relevant contract and requirements set out in section 3.1. An investigation must be a fair and unbiased method of investigating the issues raised in the challenge. The process of investigation allows the review panel to establish facts relating to the issues raised and gives the postmaster the opportunity to identify and answer any points or queries raised by the review panel. The panel may have to undertake further inquiries as a result of new or any additional information provided as part of the decision review process. Now, just pausing there, the nature of your concern, as I understand it, relates primarily to the composition of that panel. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, I don't believe we see the composition of the panel defined in this policy document. Why were you, or why are you concerned about Post Office's proposals in relation to who will sit on this review panel and make a determination?
Well, my understanding is that it would consist of 2 senior Post Office employees, a non-voting chair, and a postmaster. And we felt, and we see this in a lot of the processes that the Post Office are putting in place. They're bringing postmasters into, in essence, a decision-making place, and we feel that that's placing those postmasters in a potential position of harm on the basis of if something did go wrong, the Post Office is then able to turn around and go, well, we had postmasters, so like they said it was okay. I don't think that's fair for postmasters who may be entering into these situations in good faith, and I don't think it's that the Post Office have still got too much control over it, and hence the reason we would prefer to sort of see a proper mediation sort of process with CEDA or ACAS, so that if it gets to that situation, it's taken out of the Post Office's hands in essence, and it's someone else who's making the decision, just as the Postmaster Non-Executive Directors discussed on earlier on this week.
So your proposal is for some form of formal mediation?
Yes.
Correct. And who, in your view, should be responsible for funding that process?
Well, the Post Office.
Thank you. I've no further questions for you, Mr. Greenhow. If you could remain there.
Thank you.
The Chair may have some questions for you, and I believe there are questions from some of the co-participants.
Okay.
Well, let's have the co-participants, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Greenhow. My name's Miss Patrick, and together with Mr. Maloney, we asked questions on a number of sub-postmasters who were convicted and have since had their convictions quashed. You'd be happy to know we want to ask you about 2 documents
Okay.
and 2 issues. And the first issue is about the pre-GFA relationship between the Post Office and the NFSP.
Yes.
And I want to look at one document. It's POL 3021485. Now, just before it comes up, I'll tell you what it is. It's not a document we would have expected you to see at the time.
Oh.
It's a board minute from the Post Office from 2004. So before your time. I just want us to have a look at it together. You see on the first page, just to confirm, there's meetings of the board, October 13th, 2004. The section I want to look at is on page 13, so if we could scroll to page 13, I'd be very grateful. And it's the section at the bottom half, so if we can go to the bottom half of the page and stop there. If we can scroll a little bit back up, I'd be grateful. Thank you. Now, can you see that section there headed Sub-Postmaster Exhibition?
Absolutely.
And it says, David Mills reported, and there's a little bit of a conversation there about a subsidiary of Hayes Travel being offered a stand at a Sub-Postmaster Exhibition to promote a Bureau de Change project. There's a little bit there about a conflict of interest, potentially. And it says, the board agreed that it was both damaging and inappropriate for a direct competitor of Post Office to be accommodated at the exhibition in this way. And the second bullet point, Post Office Limited would reconsider the subsidy provided to the NFSP if they continue to undermine the position of Post Office Limited. And then they go on with a few other things, the next steps they're going to take, having suggested that's their concern. Now, this suggests that even in 2004, there were some subsidies being paid by the Post Office to the NFSP, doesn't it?
It does.
Yep. And as far as the Post Office, at least, was concerned, from this, one of the potential levers the business held was in the manipulation or the use of those subsidies, wasn't it?
Yes.
Now, you've said today that the problem lies in the culture, the controlling culture of the Post Office, and how that's reflected in its relationship with sub-postmasters and with the Federation.
Yes.
Is that kind of attitude, that problematic culture, reflected in this minute?
I would say so.
Yeah. And is it indicative of that kind of historic problem in the relationship that you've told the inquiry about today?
Obviously, back in 2004, I was just an ordinary member, so I wasn't really involved in the NFSP in any way, shape or form at that point. However, I would suggest, as I did read this prior, that this gives an indication of how long the manipulative behaviour of the Post Office has existed.
And if we can be really frank, this is a relationship between the NFSP and the business, the Post Office.
Yes.
That relationship was always going to be one where the interests of the Federation as a whole would be at the forefront of the organisation, and perhaps something that would be difficult to put before the interests of a small group of sub-postmasters, no matter how catastrophic the damage to that small group might be.
Well, I think if you, and I don't know where it is actually in my written statement, but when you, not long after this in 2006, there is the evidence in relation to the green gyros. And at that point, the NFSP threatening to take legal action against the Post Office for its actions against postmasters. No, I wouldn't necessarily agree with you, but what I can't turn around and say at this point in time is, as I've kind of indicated before, the simple reality is the NFSP of the past believed the Post Office and put their faith in the Post Office rather than believing and putting their faith in postmasters.
Okay.
It's particularly in relation to this case, and it is. And again, I put it in my witness statement that it's sad in one sense that despite the fact that through the branch and regional network, the information came to the executive of the Post Office who acted upon it, but it doesn't appear that when it comes to this situation, that unfortunately happened. So again, you know, I offer my apologies to those victims.
Okay. If we can move on to the second issue, thank you. And it's a point about the position of the NFSP during the GLO litigation.
Okay.
And you've gone over the position with counsel to the inquiry at some length. I only want to look at one point. But if we can go back and I can remember this morning you described attending the first day of trial.
Yes.
And not being able to afford private support to Mr. Bates, having missed him on the corridor during a break.
Yes.
You said your colleagues at the NFSP were following the trial, including daily updates being put online by Mr. Wallace on his
Yes.
log. And of course it was important that the organisation was following what was going on, wasn't it?
Yes.
And might you have dipped into the blog yourself?
I did on occasions, yes.
Now, I'm just going to have a quick look at the common issues judgment for the one point that I want to ask you about. And it's POL 20112043. And if that could be brought up, I'd be grateful. If it can't, you can trust me that I'm reading from it.
Which paragraph is it within the...
It might help you, Mr. Greenhow. We're going to look at the two paragraphs you said that initially you paid particular attention to this morning. Paragraphs 574, which is on page 185. And I'll start reading, and it may appear, because I think this paragraph and the paragraph after may be very familiar to you. And I can see you've got the hard copy, which is very helpful. It starts, it's under the heading, the Post Office's relationship with the NFSP.
Yes.
It says subjects relevant for the following reasons. And it's the first part of 574 I want us to look at. The Post Office relied in numerous places, both in its evidence and in its submissions, upon the fact that the NFSP does not support the litigation.
Mm-hmm.
And it gives an example. As an example, in its written opening, it submitted, it should be noted that the National Federation of Sub-Postmasters, the NFSP, which is the organisation which represents sub-postmasters and their interests nationwide, does not, underlined, support this action and does not endorse the factual premises of the claims. And if we can skip to the next paragraph, down to 575, it goes on again, public support for a cause or a lack of NFSP support for the claimants does not cut much ice in court.
Mm-hmm.
It plays no part whatsoever in the outcome. I've already referred to public and press interest in this litigation for the reasons explained, and that plays no part either. I'm entirely disinterested in whether the NFSPC does or does not support the proceedings. However, for the two reasons identified, and because some of the Post Office witnesses, for example Mr. Beale, dealt with NFSP involvement, and it was relied upon by the Post Office, it was of sufficient relevance to permit Mr. Green some limited cross-examination on this subject. It should also be noted that Mrs. Van den Bogard also gave evidence that the NFSP has publicly supported the Post Office's view that Horizon is robust. The Post Office therefore relies upon this support by the NFSP to support its stance in this litigation. Now, I just have a few questions for you, having read it, and I'm sorry that it's not come up on screen for everyone. Did the NFSP have any discussion internally during the trial when it became clear that the Post Office was relying on their lack of support for the GLO claimants?
I don't think so. I think the first time that I became aware of this was when I read it. However, I was present in court when Mr. Beale said what he said, and I thought, well, that's strange. Where's he got that from? Obviously, I've learned now this side of the GLO exactly sort of where it came from, and obviously my predecessor was very much supportive of the Post Office's position, but I don't think that was necessarily indicative of everyone within the NFSP, but it certainly was indicative of his viewpoint.
And you can see that, and you've said again, your viewpoints weren't necessarily indicative of your predecessor, but you were in charge by this time. And here was, perhaps not unsurprisingly, the Post Office relying expressly in the litigation on the publicly, repeatedly expressed position of the NFSP that Horizon was considered to be robust. When that became clear, did it become clear to you during the trial?
I don't think it did, no.
So had the NFSP taken a position that it was going to be studiously and positively neutral without a clear appreciation of the case that the business was going to run against its former members?
You know, as I've already sort of explained, we just felt, I was new to the role. We were not involved in the case. We didn't know what was being said, really, so we didn't know the inner workings of it. We could sort of see what was being said.
Can I just stop you there, Mr. Greenhow? The NFSP position really wasn't truly neutral, was it? You were really just letting the Post Office do what it wished with your name, holding your peace and waiting to see what way the chips fell.
Sorry, I don't agree with that.
I mean, in the circumstances of what happened, where the Post Office was actively relying on the lack of support from the NFSP, where your colleagues were monitoring proceedings in the trial from the blog covering the daily events, where you turned up to court on the first day without expressing any support for those 555 GLO claimants, where you couldn't manage to reach out to Mr. Bates on the day despite seeing him across the room. Can you appreciate that your position was seen by them as very far, far away from neutral?
Yes, I can see that, but that's honestly wasn't sort of the case, and I think the evidence that's been presented to the kind of viewpoint that I was taking sort of before gave an indication so that my viewpoint was different to that of that of my predecessor. But that's as much as I can say.
Did you ever say that on the record before the judgment was handed down?
I don't think I did. No.
Thank you. No more questions, Mr. Greenhow.
Mr. Greenhow, my name is Sam Steen. I represent a large group of sub-postmasters been affected by the Post Office scandal. Now, during the evidence this week, we heard the questioning of Mr. Ismail, Saf Ismail.
Yes.
And during the course of that, there was discussion regarding a letter written on the 17th of May of this year from Mr. Patterson of Fujitsu. Now, that letter, and I'll quote it from the evidence, states that, to be clear, Fujitsu, FSL, will not support the Post Office to act against sub-postmasters. We will not provide support for any enforcement actions taken by the Post Office against postmasters, whether civil or criminal, for alleged shortfalls, fraud or false accounting. And the letter goes on to say, it seems that the Post Office may be continuing to pursue postmasters for shortfalls in their accounts using Horizon data. We would have expected that the Post Office has changed its behaviour in light of the criticisms and is appropriately circumspect with respect to any enforcement actions. And then lastly, Mr. Patterson of Fujitsu says this: it should not be relying on Horizon data as the basis for such shortfall enforcement. I'll repeat that last bit. So Mr. Patterson, middle of May 2024, is saying the Post Office should not be relying on Horizon data as the basis for such shortfall enforcement. Date of that letter, 17th of May 2024. Was the NFSP told about the content of that letter from Fujitsu?
The first time I became aware of it was as it was read out in court. And I immediately sort of contacted some colleagues and said, Horizon is no longer reliable. What does that mean in relation to what we do as far as any shortages? And it really concerns me, because should it be a case that any postmaster, whether it's 20 quid, when they do their trading period, that they put that 20 quid in? That is a huge question.
It goes to two issues, doesn't it? The one that you're just speaking about, which is the effect upon postmasters in their branches, where there is a shortfall.
Yeah.
And as we know from the YouGov report, people are still paying up for shortfalls.
Yes.
So where there are shortfalls, it should have been made clear, do you agree immediately
Absolutely.
that the data from Horizon was unreliable and unreliable for the pursuit of shortfalls?
Yes.
The second part, that particular information in May of this year affects the question of ongoing investigations into postmasters.
Yeah.
For the obvious reason that if the police are carrying out at this moment in time, an investigation into any sub-postmaster, they should have been informed immediately in May 2024 that the Horizon system was was as ever unreliable for the purposes of providing data to support investigations. Do you agree?
Yes, I do. And if I may go back to what I said earlier on, I've tried to get the government to do a full review of Horizon, but there is a refusal to do that, because Post Office are telling government that Horizon is robust.
And during this inquiry, we've considered what's happened when investigations into individuals, sub-postmasters, have been the result of a failure of disclosure. We've seen what's happened. In May of this year, the Post Office was told that Fujitsu's Horizon system should not be used as the basis for investigations, considerations of shortfalls. Yet nobody's told about it. Is this same old for the Post Office?
It would appear so in that case, yes.
Now, I'll turn to a different point, if I may. You make a point in your statement regarding the question of network transformation.
Yes.
And its impact upon sub-postmasters' branches, and indeed, I think, your own branch. Is that right?
Yes, we will be losing our branch on the 11th of October.
Help us understand a little bit more how that's connected to network transformation, because if we go back in time, network transformation is a while ago. Why is that still having an impact? Why is it having an impact on your branch and others in terms of closing them?
So network transformation was a programme that was a government programme that started in 2012 and it ran to 2018. In 2018, when the programme finished, there was about 700 postmasters who were classified as hard to place, and my own office was one of them. The reason being is that no one was wanting, there was no potential new postmaster who was coming forward to take on the business. As I've already explained, in 2015, my wife and I had to make the very difficult decision not to sort of carry on or not convert to the local model, because we felt, sorry, I might be speaking too quickly here, we felt that it would not make financial sense to do that. Sadly, in 2023, in February 2023, the Post Office came along and they presented good news to me that they were going to shut all of the remaining hard to place, and at that time it was about 130 of them. And the reason that I was given that was because of the end bit coming in by March of 2025. They did not wish to put that group of postmasters through the training and also the investment as far as the equipment is concerned. So they were going to be closing those offices, leaving those offices without potential provision. But they also stated that they were going to change the exit compensation that postmasters would receive from 26 months down to 12 months, which would result in those postmasters losing, on average, £43,000, which is obviously a significant amount of money, depending on the stage of life that you happen to be. Many of those colleagues were well beyond state retirement age and had underlying health issues that meant that they shouldn't be working. But yet the post office's attitude was, we've made a board decision, that's what's happening, and we're not prepared to shift in any way, shape or form. The only concession that we could get was that at the start of this year, they would put boots on the ground, as they said, and they would go around the remaining offices to see if someone would be willing to take on the office within the community. Unfortunately, I've said in my statement that there was 30, that is now 40 postmasters who are going to be in a situation. 10 have already closed, 30 are in the process of closing, and as I've said, my office will close on the 11th of October. May I just sort of say at this point, and I think it's important, because I think it's important to not just hear, but to colleagues who may be listening to this. It's been said on some social media groups that I may have accepted a deal from the post office, and I want to make it clear that in no way, shape or form have I accepted any financial agreement from the post office that benefits me to the detriment of my fellow colleagues. I would never do that.
Did network transformation and the issues that you've discussed, did that have an unfair or unequal impact upon smaller branches, family branches, in rural areas or areas of lower population?
I wouldn't go as far as to say that, but what I would say is that the way that the business is being run today, I would say that the new services that are coming on tend to be going to the larger offices. For example, Every that's coming on, Amazon, DPD, a lot of the banking is actually done within the larger offices, and that's meaning that more rural, urban post offices are not getting those services. They are losing income. So we are seeing a disproportionate, those who are doing quite well versus those who are struggling.
Now, the post office has a social aspect in terms of social provision of services within the community.
Absolutely.
Within the government funding requirements, there are requirements to ensure that there are certain numbers of branches within given areas and head of
Access
population.
criteria, yeah.
Repeat that, please.
Access criteria.
Yes. Now, in terms of the access criteria, where you are looking at a branch in an area that perhaps of low population density, which would tend to mean lower footfall within the post office branch, is that reflected, that lower income into the branch, is that reflected in the income from the post office to the sub-postmaster?
Well, yes. What we've got is a situation that if we were to go back to 2013, the average income to a postmaster was about £42,000. It's now down to about 35. That's the average income to a postmaster. If you take inflation into account, obviously, that's going to be significantly lower.
But just make sure that we understand, and perhaps I missed it because I was being given a piece of information, but in the smaller branches, is there a funding, if you like, bias towards those branches?
Yes.
Right.
Now, some of them will be, for example, my own office still receive what's known as, well, it was known as its core tier payment, but it's now called an assigned office payment, which is, in essence, a basic flat remuneration, and then we get paid a commission on each transaction that we do.
Right. And when was that last reviewed?
It's that the review for the assigned office payment is usually done on an annual basis, and that is usually linked to inflation. And that is something that the NFSP have negotiated with the Post Office and got in place.
Okay. And can you just confirm that the DBT are reviewing the National Transformation Scheme?
No, they're not, and I think they should. As you know, we have launched a campaign as far as network transformation is concerned, because having been part of this inquiry for so long and listening to what is being said, I came to realise, in one sense, two things: that the organisation back in 2012, 2015 that was doing everything it possibly could in relation to the complaints and mediation scheme was exactly the same organisation that was implementing network transformation. Too often I was hearing from colleagues that they felt as if they were being cajoled or forced or bullied into converting to one of the models, and that has led to the financial detriment. Now, I've described in my statement that I am a qualified mortgage advisor. I'm not practicing any longer, so I can't use the. I'm not qualified. I'm not authorised, I should say, but I'm qualified. And I know under that you have to be qualified and authorised to give financial advice. Well, did that constitute financial advice? When the Post Office came in and said, right, okay, we think it's a good idea for you to move or convert or whatever, was that constituted a financial advice? So I think the government should really do a full review, how that review is done, whether that's a judicial review or a legal review or whatever it is. But I do think government has to look into that and investigate whether the activities and the actions and the culture of the Post Office has led to the detriment of postmasters under the Network Transformation Programme.
Okay, last topic. Should be quite short. Throughout the inquiry, we've been pursuing the question of the helplines.
The helplines, yes.
The helplines. The Post Office helpline and then the Fujitsu helpline. And the questions that we've been pursuing, as you're well aware, have been whether those helplines have actually provided any help at all, or are they, in fact, the unhelpful lines, okay? Now, we know through the YouGov report that people are still having difficulties with the Horizon system. People are still experiencing shortfalls. They are still paying off shortfalls, okay? Does the NFSP receive information regarding the helplines, the calls that are being made, the way that they're dealt with, and trends being expressed within those helplines?
Not that I'm aware of.
Why not?
Good question. That's.
Have you asked for that?
I'm not aware if we have, actually, to be honest.
Well, that sounds like a no.
No, okay.
Do you agree that it would be helpful if the NFSP and any other organisation had access to the data that is being provided across the helplines, the scripts, the complaints, the concerns being expressed to those helplines, as far as it is possible to get them cleaned of any confidential information?
Absolutely.
Is that a matter that you're going to undertake to take up with the Post Office?
Leave that with me. You can be assured that that will be done.
1 minute. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr Greenhow. My name is Christy Allen, and as you're aware, I represent core participant Susan Sinclair, who was the first sub-postmaster to successfully appeal her conviction in Scotland. I just have a few questions for you today. At paragraph 174 of your first witness statement, you state that on the back of the mass exoneration legislation proposed by the UK government earlier this year, the NFSP made several attempts to initiate a meeting with the Scottish Justice Minister and the Lord Advocate, but to no avail.
Yeah.
Can you please elaborate on your attempts to meet with these individuals? When did you first contact them? What was the format of your communication? And have you been successful in receiving any kind of response?
We've received a response, which I think is within the core bundle, and I can't remember the very specific details of it, but I think you'll have been able to read that. But as far as trying to get to the Lord Advocate and the Justice Minister of Scotland has proved difficult. I think they've obfuscated that down the line. I have to say, in contrast, we sent the same correspondence at the same time to the counterparts within Northern Ireland, who very graciously invited us to meet with them, and they were very clear about their desire to be included within the new legislation that the government introduced. But we've heard nothing from the Scottish Government or the Lord Advocate on that basis.
So there's no proposed meeting at the moment with the Lord Advocate?
No.
In recent months, the Lord Advocate in Scotland has publicly confirmed that she and the Crown Office in Scotland is committed to addressing all miscarriages of justice and to achieving justice for those impacted, and that she is committed to reflecting on whether anything could have been done differently by prosecutors in Scotland. Is this reflective of the NFSP's experience of the personal commitment by the Lord Advocate to get to the bottom of the events which gave rise to this scandal in Scotland?
As you know, obviously the process in Scotland is different than it is down here. And it's something that's kind of perplexed me, I have to say, and again, I'm I'm talking as someone who's non-legal. But much has been made about the fact that the Post Office can do private prosecutions. But coming from Scotland, I'm aware that obviously that can't be done. And when you look at the proportion of people who have been convicted in Scotland in comparison to the rest of the country, it's not disproportionate. So you kind of have to question what is going on within Scotland that's different sort of down here. Because I would have hoped that actually, given the fact that the Procurator Fiscal has to take it, and I'm right in saying that, so the evidence is presented to the Procurator Fiscal, who then sort of looks at it and determines whether a case will sort of be brought, rather than the Post Office being able to obfuscate all of that and bring it. That there would have been less people in Scotland, but it doesn't seem to be the case. And I think that's a fundamental question that the Lord Advocate needs to sort of answer, as to why there is as many people within Scotland who have been victimised on a proportional basis as there has been sort of down here. But I do think it's really important that when it comes to exonerating these people and making sure that they get the redress they deserve, that happens as quickly as possible. And it's really important that the Scottish Government and the Lord Advocate get that sorted.
And that brings me kind of on to my final question. According to information provided by the Scottish Cabinet Secretary, Angela Constance, earlier this month, only 2 out of a possible 141 affected sub-postmasters have thus far been written to in accordance with the terms of the mass exoneration legislation in Scotland. And indeed, the Scottish Government is apparently still in the process of assessing the 141 possible cases. In your view, what more should be done in Scotland at this time, and by whom?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that one, actually, to be honest. I'm sorry, but I think the Lord Advocate, you know, at the end of the day, Lord Advocate is the most senior person within the legal industry within Scotland. So you'd have to sort of say the responsibility lies with her. I think it's a her. So on that basis, I think that's where it should start. I think what is worrying is, my understanding is that when it comes to the number of people, the people who have been convicted, actually they're not necessarily aware of who the people are. There's a lot of people, so that, you know, that they just don't know who. They know there's been convictions, but they don't know who they are or where they are. And that's really worrying, because there could be people sitting at home. And I think this is maybe something, and I hope I'm not talking out of turn here. I'm not sure whether we can just exonerate someone, give them some money, job's done, see you later, on you go. I don't think that's enough. Because I do think that there are people out there who are broken, emotionally, physically. As a result of that, they have absolutely no trust within the authorities of this country. It has left them broken. And I do think that there has been an attempt, maybe attempt's the wrong word, but there has been, well, if a kind of thought process, well, if we just say sorry, we exonerate them, give them some money, everything's fine. Everything in the garden is rosy. And I don't think that's going to be the case. I think this is going to live with people for the rest of their lives, irrespective of whether they are exonerated and get compensation. It's, you know, one of the other things that's going on at this moment in time, or has just completed, is the infected blood scandal. Okay, so we say sorry, we give them the compensation. You can't cure hepatitis on that basis. These people, unfortunately, and I know people who have sadly, whose families have been impacted by that. You can't just get away from that. Sorry.
So in short, more work has to be done in Scotland?
Absolutely, without question. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Greenhow.
Mr. Greenhow, in respect either of Scotland, just Scotland, or in relation to all parts of the United Kingdom, do you think that the NFSP has a role to play in speeding up the exoneration process. And I'm not asking you that just in the abstract, but in particular in relation to providing any information that you may hold about former members who were convicted.
Listen, if there's anything that we can do to help, we will. I think we've shown through this inquiry just exactly how much time and effort that we have given to this inquiry. If you've asked for any information, we've given you the information. We've volunteered information that even we haven't been asked for. If there's anything we can do, we will do it.
Well, I think this wouldn't be the inquiry seeking information from you. This would be, if it's practical, and I'm asking you an open-ended question, if it's practical for the NFSP to search its records for former members who were convicted and provide those names to whichever authority it is, in whichever country of the United Kingdom.
I don't think we know. Actually, that's the problem.
You don't know either.
We don't know either. That's the problem. I mean, one of the aspects and one of the things that that concerns me about all of this is when it came to a conviction, the NFSP were not involved. That's beyond our remit. That's within, dare I say it, within your remit. That's within the legal industry. We didn't get involved. We didn't get involved. So we weren't involved.
Hang on a sec. I would have expected, shall I say, not imagined, that if a member of the Federation had in fact been convicted of an offence related to their work as a sub-postmaster, the consequence would be that they'd cease to be a sub-postmaster, but also cease to be a member of the Federation. And I just wondered whether you'd have any records of that kind.
I think we certainly weren't told the reason why they were no longer a postmaster. So I don't think we know. And there's certainly, to my knowledge, there hasn't been any correlation work done to at the time to why someone stopped being a postmaster and whether there was actually a court case was the reason behind it. So unfortunately, I don't think we know. If there's anything that we can do,
that's fine. That sounds it. Yeah, fine. Any other questions?
So I think that concludes.
Well then, thank you very much, Mr. Greenhow, for your participation to date, which I'm sure will continue. I think I'm right in saying that you have been seeking to assist the inquiry throughout all its phases, including the non-statute evidence today.
Thank you.
So, Ms. Hodge, we start again at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning?
I believe so, sir, yes.
Fine. All right, thanks very much.
Thank you.